Shalom, this is Rob Van Hoff. Welcome to Ancient Manuscripts with this week's Torah portion, which is Parashat Tissa, which is famous for the golden calf incident. And we're going to zero in just on this fragment that you see here from the Dead Sea Scrolls. Now, the manuscripts we've looked at in the last few weeks, they were from the Maccabean area. They were dated to the 2nd century BC. And even though they were found at the Qumran, in the Qumran caves, they did not originate from the Qumran community. They were written probably in Jerusalem and brought to Qumran to be stashed. This manuscript, on the other hand, is from the Herodian period and might have been written at Qumran. But this is a passage that we see here from Exodus 34, verse 10, which is our Torah portion this week. So, and that's right here, Exodus 34, verse 10. And we're going to see it's a little bit different than what we're going to see in the Masoretic text, which I have here. Let's see if I can manipulate my screen here. From a manuscript 1,000 years newer, but still 1,000 years old to us, from the Washington Pentateuch. We're going to be looking at this section over here where he says, Vayomer. So this is, and the Lord said, Hine anochi choret brit neged kol amecha. I will make a covenant before all the people. And this is on the other side of him declaring that he's going to forgive Israel from their sin of the golden calf, and they're going to go forward and build the Mishkan, just as Moses had been commanded prior to the building of the golden calf. But we have such a small fragment here to look at. And another interesting point here is this little bit of text that you see up above. Well, that's actually from Exodus 19, verse 9. So you might ask, why do we have Exodus 19 and then jump to Exodus 34 on the same page? So what is clear then, this is not a scroll of Exodus, but rather this is a scroll that has different passages of Scripture, maybe all from Exodus. We don't know because we don't have the whole manuscript. But it had a collection, most likely, of important verses for study. So think about, your favorite passages that maybe you've memorized from the Tanakh or from the Torah. And if you haven't memorized the whole Torah, you might have your favorite passages. And so you could write those all out maybe from memory and have them on a small, accessible little scroll, rather than carrying a whole Torah scroll around with you and having to move it around. And we know that the scribes at Qumran did this. They had collections of psalms or passages of Scripture all on one scroll. So the scroll wasn't like a scroll of Exodus or a scroll of the whole Torah, but of a collection of verses. So what we see here up above in Exodus 19:9, this is where Moses is, if you remember chapter 19, he's getting ready to receive the Torah. And it says that the Lord said to Moses, Behold, I'm coming to you in a thick cloud, that the people will believe you forever. And then it says Moses told the words of the people to the Lord. And so this is the end of that passage right here, where it says Vayaged Moshe. And what we'll see here, just to study the script, oops, I get my marker on here. That's a Vav. The Yod is like a little point, but it's hard to differentiate really from the Vav. They're so close. The Vav has that little hook, but the Yod has a little bit more sharp of a point. And then the next letter is a Gimel, and that's even harder to say. And then the Dalet looks something like that. I'm trying to double it up here to make it look thicker. Vayaged, and then Moshe here, you'll see there's another Vav and a Shin, and then a Hey would have been right here. Now what's interesting, I'll just write it in my normal block. And Moses told, we see that Moshe is spelled Mem, Vav, Shin, Hey. Whereas if we were to look up this verse in the Masoretic text, we would see that it is spelled just Mem, Shin, Hey. And of course the Masoretes would put a holum there, Moshe. So nevertheless, this is not a entire manuscript of Exodus. It has, and what we have here is the end of Exodus 19:9 and the beginning of Exodus 34:10. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today, is this lower bit here. And you might already recognize that this writing here is a different kind of writing than what we have here. And if you notice that, good for you, because this is the Tetragrammaton in Paleo-Hebrew. Now, of course, we don't have the Yod. The Yod presumably would have looked something like that. But we do have the part of the Hey, and we could see the other Hey right here. And we see the Vav. So this is our Paleo-Hebrew Tetragrammaton, looking something like that. And if we were to put it in the Aramaic blocks, were Yod, Hey, Vav, Hey. But that's all we have. And well, there's a problem here, because if this is Exodus 34, Exodus 34 doesn't have the Tetragrammaton in it. It says, Vayomer, and he said, Hine anochi koret, behold, I am cutting a covenant. Well, guess what? If we look at the Septuagint says something different. It says, and the Lord said to Moses. So while we know, and we'll get there in a bit, from the rest of this, that this is certainly Exodus 34:10, when we compare it with the Masoretic text, we get something different here. And so the presumption is that the reconstruction here would be something like, Vayomer, and then we'd have our Yod He Vav He here, and then El Moshe, and that might be over here, El Moshe. Not going to have room on the page. Well, I guess I could if I do that. But it'll go back to the block script. And probably Moshe will be spelled fully with the Vav here, because we know that it's spelled that way up here. Remember, this is Mem, Vav, Shin, Hey, Moshe. Because this is a this is not a Torah scroll, remember, not a scroll of Exodus. This is a collection of scriptures made easier to read. And so when you see that Vav here, it makes it easier for the reader to know to say Moshe. So this reading seems to be close to what we see in the Septuagint for Exodus 34:10. Well, how do we know it's Exodus 34:10? Well, we see here key words, and we're going to look at each line. This line here, then this line, and then this here. So we've got three different passages to look at here. And Kol Amcha is the first thing we see here. We see a Kaf, Vav, Lamed, Ayin, Mem, Dalet, and oh, sorry, no, that's a Kaf again, another Kaf, and then a Hey. Now that Hey, you might think that's a Kaf, or a Het rather, but it's not. It's a Hey. And so if I write that in Hebrew block, it would be Kaf, Vamed, Lamed, Kaf, Vav, Lamed, Ayin, Mem, Kaf, Hey. Kol Amcha. And then, let's look at the next line. Lamed, Hey, Aleph, Resh, and then a tzadi, a final tzadi. And then we have a bet, Kuf, Resh, and then another bet. And so what does this spell? What we see here then is, maybe what I'll do is I'll write it just to the side here, maybe this side over here. We have, oops, go back to my red, Kol Amacha. Then we have something with a lamed and then haaretz. And then we have what looks like Bekerev. Well, if we look at Exodus 34:10, that's exactly what we have here. We have, I will make a covenant, koreit brit neged kol amecha. Do you see that? Kol amecha. All your people. But we'll notice that in the Masoretic text, it's kaf lamed. Kaf lamed. What we see on our text from Qumran is there's a vav in here to say kol, and then amacha, instead of the final kaf with a kamatz, your people, it has the hey functioning as the vowel. And so in both these places, we see an extra vowel, so that MT would have kaf lamed, and then your people, with the kaf sofit, with the kaf amacha. So what we see again, just like we saw with the word Moshe, remember Moshe up above had this mem, had this extra vav here. That's the O sound. Moshe. So too down here below, we see the Masoretic text has Kol Amacha, and the Qumran is adding this letter and this letter. Why? Because these are being used as vowels to help the reader. Kol Amacha, all your people. The meaning is exactly the same. Meaning is exactly the same. And then we continue on. We see something with a lamed haaretz, and sure enough, he says, "E'aseh niflaot asher lo nivra'u ve'kol haaretz." I will make wonders which have never been created in all the earth. Ve'kol haaretz. And so we look back here and we see the end that kol haaretz, we see the lamed, so we can think back and say, yeah, it's going to be kaf vav lamed. So in other words, if we were to write it, it would be something just like this word here, replicated down here. Kol haaretz. And then we just have this third line here, right here, Bekerev. Well, let's look down here and see what we have. And it says, Vera'a chol ha'am, and all the people will see, Asher ata bekirbo et ma'aseh Adonai. Here you see bekirbo, in its midst. In its midst. Bekirbo, in the midst of the people. He's doing the work of the Lord. Bekirbo. Well, that's what we have here. Bekerev. And so presumably that there would be a vav here where this got flaked off. A vav. So this then is bet, kuf, resh, bet, vav. Bekirbo. In its midst. So there's no other verses that are candidates for this cluster here. So even though we don't have the whole sentence, we can learn from this cluster of phrases. And of course, if we were just looking at the Masoretic text, we would think, oh, it can't be Exodus 34:10 because we have a tetragrammaton here. But if we look and realize that the text traditions outside of Jerusalem were very, very fluid. Just like we're seeing here, vowel points added, other things were added for clarification. So they knew who said it, right? Who said it to whom? Sometimes the Torah just says Vayomer, and he said, and you need to know from the context. But what we see here, this is not a Torah scroll. This is not even a scroll of Exodus. This is a manuscript that had a collection of diverse passages of Scripture clustered together. And what I really like about this passage is that we see the tetragrammaton used as kind of a set apart, right? Set apart script. So they use the Paleo Hebrew to set apart the tetragrammaton. That's like, you know, in modern Bibles today, you'll see capital O, capital R, capital D, right? The Lord, that sort of thing. That's what they were doing. Again, we see this a lot in Qumran. The collection of diverse passages of Scripture all written together on a smaller scroll. And our presumption is that that had to do with study. These were passages of Scripture that were easily then moved around and could be unrolled and studied together. And this particular verse, this particular section of scroll, even though we have just a little fragment here, connected Exodus 19, the preparation of receiving the Torah, with the revelation of who the Lord is, how he reveals himself to be in Exodus 34, towards the end of our Torah portion, Tissa. So a lot of fun stuff here. Now, if we were to compare the Paleo Hebrew style that we see here and compare it with the manuscripts that we've been looking at the last couple of weeks, we'd see that the letter formation is a little bit different. So this is written in a style where they no longer are copying texts in Paleo Hebrew. Rather, they're copying in the Aramaic square script that we see below, and only very rarely do they refer to the Paleo Hebrew script. And it's just to set apart the tetragrammaton like that. So there we go. That's our little fragment to look at this week from Parashat Tissa. This manuscript is called 2Q3, so is from Cave 2 at Qumran, and this is available for your own viewing. Again, as always, it's the deadseascrolls.org.il, www.deadseascrolls.org.il, and that IL again is for Israel. And they have probably thousands of high-res images, and what we're looking at here is an infrared image. Of course, this is not the colors of the original manuscript. Sometimes it's nice to use the infrared because you get the better contrast and it's more legible. But this is what we have here, and I hope this has been enjoyable for you as it has for me. So I hope everybody has a wonderful Shabbat, and feel free to send me an email or post a question on the little comments below our video, and I'm happy to address any questions you have about this Torah portion or this particular manuscript we looked at. Shabbat Shalom.